All right, what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Shout out to my guy Kamal, Comrade Kamal, up in the chat. Pounds to you, brother. And yeah, shout out to everybody else who's going to watch this on the live stream in the playback. Today is June 2nd, 2025, about 9:30 p.m. where I'm at right now, and we are continuing our reading of Mary Frances Winter's fabulous book here, Black Fatigue, How Racism Erodes the Mind, Body, and Spirit. We're reading this book because the term Black Fatigue has been co-opted by the alt-right and the white supremacists online, and we want to hear from the black woman who came up with the phrase Black Fatigue that is now taking the world by storm. You can pick up this book on Amazon for the humble price of only $17 paperback, $9.99 on the Kindle version, no hardcover available. And during our first reading of this book, we read the preface and the introduction where Mary was talking about the reason she wrote this book, the importance of writing this book, how it relates to black mental health, which I think is very important. We need to preserve the black mind because of the constant attack that we are under. And yeah, I'm enjoying reading this book, and today we're going to be reading the entirety of chapter 1. Hopefully we'll read chapter 2 tomorrow, and we're going to be doing a lot of reading during the summer of our summer reading list. We have a lot of books on our summer reading list for 2025. And if you have any books that you think I should read, send it to my email like Doravel always does, or put it in the comment section and we'll try to get to it. Anyway, let's continue here. Chapter 1, My Black Fatigue. I was hard-pressed to name it. It is an underlying syndrome of sorts that permeates my very being. It operates like a dull, droning sound that is always present, but most of the time is drowned out by the higher pitches of my optimism and hope. I now know it to be Black Fatigue. In sharing my story, I relate experiences of individual racism that do not explicitly uncover the systems that undergird such examples and make them possible. Racism operates at the intrapersonal, interpersonal, institutional, and structural levels. It is often systemic racism that creates the day-to-day personal experiences that I share here and throughout the book. By the way, I believe in the introduction she wrote that there was a young black girl who convinced Merriam-Webster to put in the dictionary that racism is systemic, not just an interpersonal thing. So shout out to that young black woman. I forgot exactly who did that, but shout out to her. The early years. My black fatigue started when I was 5 years old. Of course, I did not know it then, but I now recognize how that incident affected me and the way I would interact with the world from then on. I was in kindergarten in 1956, just 2 years after the landmark Brown v. Board of Education decision banning segregated schools. I was oblivious to all of that because I lived in the small town of Niagara Falls, New York, where the population was about 100,000 at that time, and the black population was probably no more than 10%. So about 10,000 black folks living in Niagara Falls, New York at the time. My school, therefore, was predominantly white. As a matter of fact, Karen, not her real name, and I were the only 2 black children in the class. The ugliness of racism did not escape us. I never had that experience. All my education growing up in Louisiana, it was like 50-50, black folks, white folks, throughout elementary school, middle school, high school, and even, luckily, even though I went to a PWI, I went to a predominantly white institution, there were still plenty of black folks at my university. So, I came out pretty well. And I hate when people say, oh, you have to go to an all-white school to get a good education. That's not the case. You get what I'm saying? I'm a product of Louisiana public education. I repeat, I am a product of Louisiana public education, and I think I'm pretty sharp. So continuing. One day, Bobby, not his real name, a freckle-faced white boy, called Karen and me the N-word. We were not exactly sure what it meant, but we knew it was not nice, so we started crying. By the way, when I write my book, eventually my autobiography, I'm not writing the N-word in my book. I'm writing N-I-G-G-E-R in big, bold, capital letters. If you're writing a book telling your story, we need to keep it raw, we need to keep it black, we need to keep it real. We should not be writing the N-word when writing our black autobiographies. But that's just my small gripe right there. Anyway, the teacher came to our rescue and inquired as to why we were crying. After we told her, she called Bobby into the coat room and told him that his red hair was ugly and his freckles were too. While I am not sure a child psychologist would have concurred with the teacher's approach, it worked for us because Bobby was crying now too. Okay, that's not the way we solve racism, by just hurling insults at gingers. I wonder if YouTube is going to demonetize me because I said the word ginger. Because white people take that very seriously. At least the Anglo whites. The whites in America take like ginger hatred very seriously, but they don't take anti-black racism very seriously. I'm pretty sure there are white folks who read this book and they were more upset that the teacher called the redhead racist boy a ginger and that his freckles were ugly more than two little black girls being called the N-word. You get what I'm saying? But I'm sure Acti isn't watching because this is Book React. Nobody watches Book React. But I would like to know what Acti thinks about this as a psychologist. Continuing here. So this was the first time I really knew that I was different and that somebody would be mean to me because of it. Consider the impressionable minds of 5-year-old children and the realization that skin color made Karen and me the subject of disdain. My parents tried to explain what the word meant and how it was used to denigrate Negroes. Yes, I am old enough that we were still referred to as Negroes. I know there are some people that were born with Negro on their birth certificate. In fact, I think if you're a child of the 90s like me, you get what I'm saying? And my dad was born in like 1960, and he was born in Alabama. I am pretty certain my dad has the word Negro written on his birth certificate. I am more than certain, because we didn't start calling each other black until like the 1970s. African American wasn't a term until the 1970s. So I'm more than certain my father on his birth certificate, it says Negro. But continuing here. So on that day, I changed from a carefree little girl to a cautious and insecure one, not being sure when somebody might be mean to me again because of the color of my skin. The realization that I might not be accepted by everyone, having to think about it and consider it, was and is stressful and contributes to black fatigue. Shout out to Kamal. He says, agreed, all or nothing. Y'all got to put context. Whenever you jump into the chat and say something agreed or yes or right on, you got to let me know what you're referring to because there's a delay in the recording. Like you're hearing what I'm saying like 1 minute after I say it. So let me know because my mind is moving so fast. It is not unusual for black children to have life-transforming aha moments, such as my kindergarten experience. Sometimes in our diversity learning sessions, we ask the question, when was the first time you knew that you were different? And what did it feel like? It is not uncommon to hear from black and other people of color that it was during participants' formative years, ages 5 to 10. Research shows that babies as young as 6 months old demonstrate a preference for their own race. It was not so much the specific name calling as it was the realization that I was black, different, not considered as good as, that was indelibly planted in my mind and that my parents could not make me feel better about. I think I knew I was black. I just did not know the implications. You see, my parents were Canadians, and not that they did not have their stories of racist situations, but they did not have the U.S. Southern racial experience. Okay. So Mary Frances Winters is a tether. Okay, to some degree she is a tether. Does this discount this book? I know we're living in the post-FBA age where any foreign black person, we immediately denigrate them, we immediately dismiss their stories and stuff like that. But let's take it on its face value. Let's take this story on its face value. She is Canadian, but she grew up in America as a phenotypically dark-skinned black woman. I don't care whether you come from Nigeria, Ghana, how many, akatas you heard in the house, how many times you heard your Jamaican parents disparage black people, you're going to get treated like the rest of us, like the lot of us. You get what I'm saying? So I know there are black people that come out with different conclusions of life. Some black people become conservative. Some black people end up becoming like liberal, far right, far left, and everything in between, right? You're still going to have those experiences, so I'm not going to discount that, right? Even Candace Owens had her own run-ins with racism as a young black girl growing up in America. You get what I'm saying? So, yeah, I think we're going to take, this American, Canadian descendant black woman's stories here in this book, and we're still going to imbibe them and learn from them, right? And that's the importance of reading too. Just because somebody comes from a different experience doesn't mean you can just discount them. All right. And Kamal says, spell the whole word. Okay. So he's talking about in reference to writing the autobiography and Nigger. Like, you got to put it out there. Anyway. So both of my parents' ancestors used the Underground Railroad to settle in Canada, and my mother loved her homeland much more than the United States, to the extent that she proudly carried her green card until the day she died at age 57. If she had lived, my parents were planning to go back to Canada after my father's retirement. Yeah, if you're black and in Canada, there is no reason to come to the United States. If you're black and in Canada, I know y'all are dealing with white supremacy and racism and anti-blackness up there. You get what I'm saying? And it might be even worse now because the Indians are coming and they're bringing the caste system and their color consciousness up there to Canada. I understand it's bad in Canada, but if you are in Canada, there is no reason to bring your black self or your black child to the United States, period. And in fact, I'm thinking about immigrating to Canada. At least it's better than the United States. At least they speak English, and at least they got Tim Hortons. Anyway. My dad did not talk much about race, but my mother told me that the reason they did not graduate from high school was that colored children were only expected to matriculate to grade 9. My dad was born in the United States and was raised by an uncle in Niagara Falls, Ontario, because his parents had died within months of each other from tuberculosis. He served in World War II in a segregated troop, married, and moved to the American side of the falls and worked as a laborer for DuPont for over 40 years. Okay, interesting story, interesting backdrop. So technically her father was American, but he was Canadian descended. And I believe her mother was born in Canada and came to marry her father, and they lived there because he got a job working in like a lumber yard or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, Kamal says Underground Railroad, and we might have to, make a way in, I don't know, St. Edward's Parish or Ontario or Montreal or something. I don't know. I don't know the Canadian provinces that well. What is there? Saskatchewan, Ontario. There's Vancouver. I forget. British Columbia. What's another Canadian province? Ooh, Prince Edward's Island. It's not St. Edward's Island. I don't know. I feel like I want to say Nantucket. Ozzy says, Canada is way better for black people than America. Facts. But we have to stop letting Canada being taken by, you know what? I'm not going to say it. Even the Canadians I've met in the States have always been pleasant to deal with. Facts. We need to go to Canada, and then they start singing They Not Like Us to us. But we're Americans and we're rude and we'll just punch them in the face. I'm joking. We love our Canadian brothers. And sisters. Ozzy says Quebec, Montreal, Calgary, Alberta, Edmonton. There we go. But one of those is Edwards, right? Prince Edward Island or something. Newfoundland, Nova Scotia. My geography is off. I would know it if I saw it, man. I'm a visual learner. But shout out to Ozzy. He must be repping Canada. Y'all repping Canada. Man, y'all better go on somewhere and eat some poutine. Listen to all the Canadian provinces. Anyway, my stark awareness of my race just continued to escalate after my kindergarten experience. My mother had cousins who lived in Baltimore, Maryland. We drove to visit them from time to time. Every time we crossed the Mason-Dixon line, my mother would turn to me in the back seat and say, "Now you have to be good, be quiet, and sit still." This was even before the police stopped us, which happened several times. They apparently saw the New York State license plates and a black man behind the wheel and wondered what we were doing out of state. They always asked my dad, a very law-abiding, non-drinking, non-smoking, pious Christian, where are you going? I was so scared by these incidents that one time I even wet my pants. I discussed the effects of race-based stress on children in Chapter 8. From the time I was 5, being black meant being on guard. As I read accounts from other authors who were writing about their early experiences with race, I find they are very similar to mine. So many black and brown people learned early that the color of our skin rather than their skin mattered in ways that frightened us, not them, and caused fear and stress. Most of our vacations were spent in Canada with my mother's family. She wanted to visit as much as she could, so we spent most holidays and summer vacations in Owen Sound, Ontario, about 110 miles north of Toronto. My Aunt Frances, after whom I am named, was quite an activist, fighting for civil rights for the Saugeen First Nation of Indians to reclaim their land. I did not understand it all then, but during our visits to Canada, she was often consumed with marches and developing petitions and other legal documents. There were plenty of discussions about racism in Canada at the dinner table with Aunt Frances, my parents, and my uncles. Shout out to Aunt Frances. There's always that one person in the family that's radical, that's turned up. Shout out to Aunt Frances. I'm pretty sure she's passed on, so God rest her soul. All right, Ozzy says, I'm not trying to discredit the author, but what year were these experiences? I'm sure it's very different now. I did hear they discriminate heavily against the natives over there. So Ozzy, I think, she said she was a child of the 60s. She's a baby boomer. I believe she was born in 1960 exactly. So, she was coming of age in late 60s, early 70s, became an adult in the 80s. Growing up in northern New York with families spread across from Baltimore to Canada, right? From Baltimore to Toronto, that's where her range of experiences were, right? But yeah, I heard definitely the discrimination against the native population in Canada is very extreme. Right. And the crazy thing is, I think in Canada, there wasn't the mass extermination that we had in the Americas. I think many of the indigenous people survived, and they were subject to, massive forms of discrimination and forced assimilation. They had those reservation schools where they forced the Indians to go to, or Native Americans, indigenous people, whatever you want to call them. So it goes deep in Canada. So other than the informal family discussions, I really knew very little about Black history in grades K through 7. There were only cursory mentions in elementary school books, if any. In middle school, my best friend, Alnita, wrote an essay on Sojourner Truth. Alnita was brilliant and a great writer. She had a way with words even in the 7th grade. She read her essay in class and even the teacher was speechless. Most students at that age would write about a famous person in a very sterile biographical fashion, but Alnita's essay helped you to feel the pain and suffering, as well as the determination and audacity of Sojourner Truth. It was life-changing for me for 2 reasons. First, I had never heard of Sojourner Truth, and second, I could have never conceived that there was a Black woman in the 1800s who challenged slavery and was an advocate for women's rights in such a fervent and visible way. Alnita spurred my love of writing and my interest in Black history. I learned that the NAACP had its roots in Niagara Falls. The Niagara Movement was a civil rights group founded in 1905 in Niagara Falls, Ontario. Scholar and activist W.B. Du Bois gathered with a small group of supporters on the Canadian side because they could not stay in hotels on the American side. The purpose of this meeting was to form an organization dedicated to social and political change for Black people in the United States. The group put together demands that included an end to segregation and discrimination in unions, the courts, and public accommodations, as well as equality of economic and educational opportunity. While the Niagara Movement had little impact on legislative action, it led to the formation of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, in 1909. Learning this bit of history about my region was truly exciting and motivated me to keep digging. Those are, fascinating, moments in a child's life. I remember when I first discovered that Huey P. Newton was from Monroe, Louisiana, and that made me very proud to be from Monroe, Louisiana. Wherever you grew up in America, if you're Black, there's always a part of Black history that should make you feel proud. Even if you grew up in the middle of Kentucky, Montana, Michigan, wherever you grew up, there's always something there that our ancestors did that should make you say, wow, we did that, then we can do anything. All right. Kamal says, I read about Sojourner every now and then. We should probably read some more stuff about her. Would like to know what books y'all want us to read on this channel, man, because we're going to go hard for the summer reading section. Summer reading section, we're going to be live. We're going to be live a lot. So continuing. In high school, I was the editor of the school newspaper. This was the late 1960s and the civil rights movement was in full swing. I was writing about Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X. That piece was banned because of the widespread negative perception of him at that time, women's rights, the Vietnam War, and other social issues of the day. More times than not, my pieces were edited by the teacher who oversaw the newspaper because she thought them to be too controversial. It was frustrating and fatiguing to be censored. In my senior year of high school, after I was accepted to the University of Rochester, my guidance counselor suggested that perhaps that school was too lofty a goal for someone like me. Sorry, my bags were packed. I was going to show her, another stressor, feeling I needed to prove myself. When I arrived at the university, there were 69 black students. The previous year, there were only about 10, out of a student body of 5,000 undergraduates. There was a two-tier set of admission criteria for students of color, equal opportunity program, and regular admits. I was a regular admit, meaning I did not have to attend the summer program designed to acclimate students of color to the university. But I was painfully aware that all of my professors assumed I was part of the equal opportunity program, and there were clear biases and signals that we did not belong. Regardless of my admission status, I know that it was because of affirmative action that I received a full scholarship to the university. My parents surely would not have been able to afford the tuition. I am proud to proclaim that I benefited from affirmative action. Without it, I know that I would not be where I am today. Shout out to Mary Frances. Shout out to affirmative action. We need to support affirmative action because even though we're living in this age where so many black folks have money, have jobs, have great opportunities, even in white supremacist, racist America, more still needs to be done. More of our people do need to have that leg up to catch up to the white supremacists that have kept us down. Because the whites for centuries have been able to accumulate wealth, education, opportunities at an unfair advantage. And affirmative action is not even an unfair advantage. It is just giving schools and institutions and companies the opportunity to make race-based hiring or other types of hiring more diverse. Right? They want to diversify their student body. They want to diversify their workforce. So they want to take that into consideration when choosing candidates. And of course, all the candidates have to be qualified and fit for the job. But diverse institutions need to be supported, and giving black people the opportunities to catch up and accumulate wealth and education should be supported by everybody. But I would like to know what y'all think about affirmative action in the chat. Continuing. The president of the university at the time said something to the effect that he thought most black students would do better at the community college. The Black Student Union took over the administration building demanding a retraction. I was part of that takeover. As a matter of fact, we held many demonstrations and late-night meetings to bring light to the discriminatory behaviors that we were constantly subjected to, such as security officers questioning whether the students of color were really enrolled at the university. Sound familiar? In 2018, a white student called the police to report that a black female was sleeping in a common area at a dorm at Yale University. The white student was concerned that she did not belong there, and it made her uncomfortable. It was fatiguing to have to justify one's existence while attempting to concentrate on schoolwork. Adding to my black history acumen, upon arrival at the University of Rochester, I learned that Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman had run abolitionist movements activities in Rochester, New York. Douglass printed his North Star newspaper in the city, and Rochester was part of the Underground Railroad. Douglass is buried in the Mount Hope Cemetery, which is adjacent to the campus. One Halloween, a group of students decided to try to find his marker. I cannot even describe the feeling of knowing that these great freedom fighters walked the same ground as me. We gotta make Hajj. We gotta make Hajj. We gotta make Hajj. We gotta make Aliyah to the grave sites of some of our freedom fighters. We have to find where Frederick Douglass is buried, Du Bois is buried, Marcus Garvey is buried, and put roses on their grave sites for laying the groundwork. Where's Malcolm buried? Because that's one I definitely got to go to, because there is no man that has changed my life more than Malcolm X. Continuing here. Nelson Moreno says, if you look good, you can move up in my company. Melania's rise was very fast. Absolutely true. Melania rose up very quick. She was an illegal immigrant who was a sugar baby to a rich, powerful, older man. And that's the only way she has been able to stay in this country. Stay in the U.S., not this country, not Hungary, by the way. If you look good, you can move up in my company. What do they have to look like, Nelson? Do they got to be white? Do they got to be white, Nelson? Adding to my black history acumen upon arrival. Okay, sorry, I already read that. While my undergraduate days were fun, the racism was truly exhausting and affected my ability to always be attentive to my classes. 15 years after obtaining my bachelor's degree and MBA from the university, I was elected as the first African-American female trustee. During my time as a voting trustee, it was fatiguing to be the only black person at many meetings, and to continually point out the lack of diversity at all levels of the university and watch my concerns be minimized or dismissed. This is not meant as an indictment of the university. I am sharing my experience. It is the history of many universities in this country. The higher education system has not changed since my days as a student or a trustee. Chapter 3 provides a then and now portrait of diversity in a number of aspects of society. The lack of progress is fatiguing. So once again, circling back to the main point of this book, black fatigue is not really just about, being frustrated at that annoying white coworker who says, really racist stuff or coded language in the office, right? It's about seeing the lack of progress, being the only black person in the room, seeing the resistance to actual diversity in the workplace, at the education institutions, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where black fatigue comes from. So continuing here, my lovely wife just came in. Hello, Acty. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Continuing. The work world. I started my work career in 1973, and affirmative action helped to jumpstart it. The Eastman Kodak Company, along with most Fortune 100 companies at the time, was scrambling to comply with the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Executive Order 11246, which was signed into law in 1965 and required not only non-discrimination in employment, but also affirmative action. And that's how the right wing was born. I was hired into a management rotational program and landed in the affirmative action department. My job was to defend the company against discrimination complaints. Working with outside attorneys, I wrote position papers. Fresh out of undergraduate school with degrees in psychology and English, I felt woefully underqualified for the task. However, I was the token black person that the company could showcase. There was really no one else of color at a high level to take on this role. It was stressful and fatiguing because of the learning curve and feeling out of my element, but also because I did not always believe that the company had not discriminated against the individual or individuals in the case of class action lawsuits. So, Kamal says, I visited Douglas and Tubman birthplace region on Maryland's Eastern Shore. Shout out to Kamal for making that Hajj. Shout out to Kamal for making Umrah to the grave sites of our ancestors. A very interesting paragraph she wrote here about how, she just finished college and she gets this really high-paying job defending a company against discrimination, right? And she says she felt out of place doing it. And I think some people might read this book and say, see, this shows affirmative action doesn't work and black students shouldn't get on a learning curve because she was unqualified for the job. No, she didn't feel good about doing the job and felt weird about defending a company when they were discriminating against black employees, right? So a few years later, I was one of 4 high-potential employees selected for the executive MBA program at the University of Rochester. The 3 others were white men who were all promoted to vice president roles after graduation. I, on the other hand, was asked what I wanted to do. I immediately selected a high-level role since my classmates had been appointed to such positions. I was told by the head of HR that no such role was contemplated for me at that time. I was assigned to competitive intelligence and marketing. It was a new department. Kodak did not formalize a competitive process until the mid-1980s, and they thought it would be a good move for me. I was assigned to study Fuji, Kodak's arch rival. Kodak's arch rival. Reading about these companies makes me feel like I'm reading about ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Fuji and Kodak, Jesus Christ. But these jobs she was working at are like working at Apple and Microsoft today. So I'll take that for what it is. It was before the advent of the World Wide Web, so I had to do my research the old-fashioned way. Library and LexisNexis. What the hell is LexisNexis? Where's Gen X at? Where's Gen X at? Where the baby boomers and Gen X at? Because I have no idea what LexisNexis is. This is ancient technology. Shit. So I worked for 6 months on the Fuji presentation for the executive team. Proud of my super sleuthing skills and confident that this presentation would be my ticket to a management position. I made my presentation. I basically told leadership that Fuji would be a formidable competitor. It had plans to penetrate the US market. I was asked to leave after my presentation while my boss stayed behind. I did not rank high enough to hear the after discussion. When he returned to the office, he did not look happy. He said that he had to fight for me to keep my job. The executive team did not believe my findings. They did not think Fuji was a threat. They believed that I had sensationalized the presentation. I was shocked. Well, not to brag, but I was right. The Fuji blimp appeared in U.S. skies the next year. Kodak lost the advertising bid for the Olympics to Fuji, and the rest, shall we say, is history. I do not know for sure why my assessment was not deemed credible. I can only assume that who I was contributed to their reaction. It was stressful and fatiguing. So, Nelson Moreno says, I tricked Melania into thinking that I was a high-value male. I mean, that wouldn't be hard. That wouldn't be hard at all. Wouldn't be hard. Melania, barely speaks English. It would be very easy to trick her. But going to this woman's story, this is fascinating. She tried to warn Kodak, this American brand, right? Hey, we're going to lose market share to these foreigners who are coming. And they basically told her to shut up, N-word B. And yeah, basically they ended up losing their pants, right? So the whole time I was in the corporate world, I did not know how to be. I had bosses who told me I was too aggressive and others who told me I was not aggressive enough. While sporting a short afro hairstyle, I was asked whether my hair would grow. When I said yes, I was told that I should let it because the afro was not professional. Okay, black women's natural hair is still an issue today as discussed in Chapter 6. The stress of not knowing who to be or how to show up so that I would be accepted led me to leave the corporate world to start my own business. It was fatiguing to be tokenized, be discredited, and not be allowed to bring even half of myself into the workplace. The microaggressions, I will elaborate on them in Chapter 6, were so common that I think I became hardened to them. I was miserable and often went home and cried about these experiences in the arms of my very supportive late husband, Joe, whom I talk about later in the chapter. The straw that broke the proverbial camel's back for me was when I had a blatant sexual harassment experience. I remained silent, but I could no longer stay in that environment. I was fatigued. While my experiences in the corporate world happened over 30 years ago, I continue to hear the very same stories from young black professionals today. As you are reading this, you might be thinking, it seems like you did okay. Affirmative action worked for you, and there is no denying that it did. This is an example of a federal policy that enabled thousands of people of color at lower socioeconomic levels to go to college. Programs inspired by affirmative action are still helping people who would not otherwise be able to attain the education they need to enhance their chances to achieve their life's goals. While data show that white women have been the primary beneficiaries of affirmative action, let's repeat, data shows that white women have been the primary beneficiaries of affirmative action. People of color have also benefited, albeit to a lesser degree. And many of these programs are being rolled back under the Trump administration as unfair to white students. The Trump administration called for abandoning Obama administration policies that allowed universities to consider race as a factor in diversifying their campuses. This is a prime example of 2 steps forward and 3 steps backward. It is fatiguing to have to continue to fight for affirmative action, a policy signed into law in 1965. It is fatiguing not to be able to have confidence that gains made based on such programs are sustainable. So once again, going back to black fatigue, where it all comes from, it's the fatigue, the tiredness of being worn down when you see the same things happen generation after generation. This woman went through all of this in like the 1960s. And she's talking to young black professionals in the 2020s, and they're going through the same thing, being the only black face in a high place, not being believed by their higher-ups when they're giving reports, and feeling like their achievements are discredited as just being, the products of affirmative action or some type of race-based hiring. Continuing, living while black. As I researched and wrote Chapter 4, Racism Literally Makes You Sick, memories of my late husband, Joseph Winters, were in my mind. He, like me, was a first-generation college graduate coming from urban Washington, D.C. in the 1960s. He had a degree in statistics and an MBA and worked as a director of finance for Eastman Kodak. He died of a massive heart attack in 1977 at age 47. Brothers, take care of your health. Comrades, take care of your health. Take care of your health, man. Take care of your health, man. For real. No more fried foods. No more fast food, man. No, not as much drinking as we do. We got to take care of our health, for real. Nelson Moreno says, made Melania dance so much she started calling me Tory Lanez. Are we saying free Tory Lanez? How y'all feel about Tory Lanez? Are we saying free Tory Lanez or not? How y'all feel about Megan and Tory? How y'all feel about Megan and Tory? And by the way, go watch the movie review my wife and I did of the Megan Thee Stallion documentary. Continuing, so her late husband was diagnosed with a coronary artery disease at age 38 after months of not feeling well and having no tests performed to explore the possibility that his shortness of breath and chest pain were related to his heart. When he was finally diagnosed, the cardiologist said that he had suffered a heart attack several months before. There was now significant heart damage that he needed a transplant. In the meantime, we found a renowned heart surgeon who was willing to perform quintuple bypass surgery in lieu of a transplant, which he really could not wait for. He lived for 9 years after the surgery. There were no strong hereditary markers for heart disease in his family. I cannot be sure whether the stress of being one of a few black men at his level in a major corporation contributed to his heart disease. I cannot be sure that, had he been diagnosed sooner, the outcome would have been any different. I cannot be sure that the reason he was not diagnosed sooner was related to racism. It is something I still wonder about. That's the thing about racism, man. Like, you never know exactly, but you feel it. And that adds to the stress. You don't know exactly why maybe the lady at the counter, was very rude to you when you were checking out. You don't know exactly why you feel like you killed that interview and you didn't get the job. You don't know exactly why that girl that you really liked, turned you down, black or non-black, and whether race had something to do with it or not. You never really know, and that's what eggs at you. And it's like, that's what adds to the stress of living while black and black fatigue. Go into the comments. Kamal says, go into Nelson Moreno. He says, the author of this book will be very happy in my company. Okay. Tell me why she would be very happy in your company. Nelson Moreno, what company you work at? I thought you sell crack. I thought you sell meth to the Portuguese. I thought you were a known, trafficker, narco-trafficante. Kamal says, I eat organic. Eat organic, and we got to stay healthy, brothers. We got to go vegan. I swear to God, in my life, one day, I'm going to go full vegan. I want to edge towards that eventually. You get what I'm saying? When I have enough money, when I have enough stability, I want to go full vegan, for real, for real. All right, Nelson Moreno says, he did it, but give him a second chance. He died crashing a 19-year-old snow bunny. That's crazy. That's crazy. Don't say that about that woman's ex-husband, man. She's a widow, man. Have some respect, bruh. Anyway, give Tory a second chance. I don't know about that. I think he did it too. I think to some degree, the reason why people are like, because Candace Owens now wants Harvey Weinstein to be free. Candace Owens is now lobbying for Harvey Weinstein to try to get free. There's also like a growing movement of guys rallying around Diddy and Tory Lanez and other essay abusers, right? Who are prominent men, popular, rich, powerful men. I think this is like another right-wing grift to just try to trigger the libs, because that's all they have to run on. You get what I'm saying? They want to pardon Derek Chauvin to just try to trigger the libs. So that's what I think they're trying to do by rallying around these types of guys like Tory Lanez, like Harvey Weinstein, like Diddy. Now, the reason I don't think Diddy should go to jail, and I'll be honest, is because he is a black man in America. That's basically it. I don't believe in any black man in America going to jail. I believe in some type of restorative justice for Diddy. I'm going to keep it absolutely real. That might be an unpopular opinion, but it's not because I hate women. I want to make that absolutely clear. I don't hate women. I do believe that he abused Cassie. I do not think the charges matched, though. I do not think it was, SA trafficking. He's running a RICO criminal enterprise. I don't believe in that. Okay? But y'all let me know what y'all think. What do y'all think in the chat? Chat, talk to me. Continuing here. So Joe, her ex-husband, and I produced two amazing offspring. Joe II is the tenured Alexander F. Heimeyer Associate Professor of Religious Studies and African American Studies with secondary positions in English and Gender, Sexuality, and Feminist Studies at Duke University. Shout out to Alex. Shout out to her son, Alex. And our daughter, Marisha, is trained as an electrical engineer but left the field as a result of many of the same inequities that I encountered and that other women in STEM fields face. She has served as Chief Operating Officer at the Winters Group for the last 8 years. She has been instrumental in the company's double-digit growth. Shout out to her children, Marisha and Joe II. When Joe was 13, I came home from work one day to find a police car in the driveway with my son in the back seat. I was very surprised and concerned. Joe was a straight-A, mild-mannered young man and certainly never in trouble. The police officer informed me that a parent of another student had filed a complaint that Joe had started a fight with the boy on the bus. After receiving more information, I learned that the other boy, White, had been bullying my son for weeks. This account was corroborated by other students. The other boy challenged my son to a fight. According to my son, the fight lasted all of 5 seconds, and the other kid had a minor injury. I would have thought that the other parents might have contacted me or Joe's dad instead of calling the police. The police officer found Joe at a neighbor's house playing basketball. He apparently had to search the suburban neighborhood, and my son would stand out as the only black boy. Joe was afraid, and so was I. When his dad got home from work, we had the talk, which I explained in Chapter 8. It is not uncommon for spontaneous thoughts about his safety to still manifest for no apparent reason. That incident happened almost 30 years ago, and we know that it could have just as easily been today. That's fatiguing. And I want to give a shout out to my mama. Shout out to Miss Ellen. Miss Ellen, I'm sorry for all the pain I put you through. Miss Ellen, I'm sorry for all the pain I put you through, for real, for real. As a young black boy in the South, I put my mama so many jail calls. So many late night jail calls. Mama, come get me. Come get me. They got me. They got me, mama. Help me. Anyway, continuing here. So when Marisha was 10, she begged for a dog. No one else in the family really wanted a dog. We finally gave in, and on her 11th birthday, we surprised her with a little brown and white Shih Tzu. He was too young to leave his mother, so we eagerly anticipated his arrival in 6 weeks' time. 2 weeks before we were to pick up Snickers, as he had been so named by Marisha, I received a call from the breeder. She said that we could no longer have the dog. I was shocked. I could not imagine why. After doing some checking with the person who connected us with the breeder, we learned that the breeder's partner had discovered that we were black and refused to sell us the dog. There was no way that I was going to then tell an 11-year-old child that she could not have a dog because she is black. So I immediately went searching for a dog that looked like Snickers. I found one, but the process was stressful and fatiguing. I tried to find some organizations that would address this blatant racism. It seems that because she was an independent breeder, there was little recourse. The reason that white person didn't want to give that dog to that black family is because a white person wanted to have sex with that dog. Let's keep it absolutely a buck. They found out that this dog, this tiny little Shih Tzu, is not going to, be licking a white clitoris or sucking on a long pink penis. So they said, nope, we can't have this dog go into a black family where the dog won't be licking people in the mouth, where the dog won't be sleeping in the bed with the people, where the dog's semen won't end up in a white woman's vagina. So the white family said, we can't give this dog to this black people. We have to remember the number one people that do bestiality are white people. White people. White people do the most bestiality and the most pedophilia. We have to remember this, and we have to protect animals at all costs. We have to protect animals, and we have to protect small children at all costs. So, remember our saying. Remember our saying. When we see the whites, keep the children out of sight. When you see the whites, the dogs and cats are in fright. All right? Continuing. Nelson Moreno says they were doing freak-offs with the dog. Facts, covering the dog in baby oil. Again, the sad part is that this happened almost 30 years ago, but could just as easily have happened last week. In my work, after almost 4 decades in the diversity, equity, and inclusion business, there are thousands of stories that I might share. I have selected one that happened in the course of writing this book that epitomizes the reason for black fatigue, a failure on the part of many white people to get it, to get how their white identity represents the normalized dominant culture and abnormalizes every other identity. As part of a large professional services firm's multicultural summit, I was asked to be a breakout speaker on white culture and inclusion in the workplace. In another breakout session, the Center for Talent Innovation, I presented the findings of its most recent research on black professionals in the workplace. The first thing I noticed was that even though the summit of over 350 people were very visually diverse, the Center for Talent Innovation breakout session of over 50 people was attended by only black people, with the exception of 2 whites. My session on white culture was also attended primarily by black, Latino, and Asian participants. What is white culture? Somebody let me know what white culture is. What is white culture? What is white culture than secretly saying the N-word when listening to rap songs in their cars alone? What is white culture other than raisins and potato salad? What is white culture other than not washing their legs and being allergic to lotion and skin routines? What is white culture? Somebody let me know. Please, please, please. In my experience presenting at and attending many conferences over the years, sessions on topics pertaining to black people are almost always filled primarily with black people. We refer to this phenomenon as preaching to the choir. After such sessions, attendees may feel affirmed by the opportunity to share common experiences, but they also likely feel frustrated with the recounting of the lack of progress. In the case of the Center for Talent Innovation study of over 3,000 respondents, there were many data points that confirmed lack of progress, such as the fact that black professionals hold only 3.2% of all executive or senior leadership roles and less than 1% of all Fortune 500 CEO positions, even though we represent 12% of the workforce. So, Kamal says, they even feed their dogs ice cream and eat off the same damn spoon. No wonder, per the Black Death, Kamal dropping facts. Comrade Kamal dropping facts. The Minister of Information. The Minister of Information. Nelson Moreno says, I rescued a dog and it always got very excited when he saw a white woman. The dog's got the red rocket. Dog got that red rocket when he saw that white lady. Dog got that red rocket. Ready to hump. Started humping. All right. In my session on white culture. What is white culture? Somebody let me know. I find this phrase hilarious. There are very few phrases that could automatically make me laugh, like white culture. That is hilarious. In my session on white culture, well-meaning white people in the room were hard-pressed to know what to do, even though they were interested in the topic. I shared whiteness theory concepts based on scholarly research that shows that many white people see themselves as raceless and cultureless. A study by Pew Research conducted in 2019 revealed that 75% of blacks and over 50% of Latinx and Asians regard their racial identity as very important to them, while only 15% of whites responded that their racial identity was important. Oh, the 15%, that's what we're going to call them now. The real white supremacists are 15%, because I think that's very high. I think that's a very high number of white people that consider their whiteness to be very important to them. And that's scary. I think that's very scary. We're going to call them the 15%ers. All right, one of the young white men in the room said, it's true, my race is not important. If it is not, how can I make it? I can't feel something that I just don't. I recommend that he start reading about the history of white people and whiteness theory to get more grounded in the ideas. I suggest some specific references in Chapter 2. While most of the participants of color were eager to support this young man's learning, there were a few eyes rolling, like, really? The sentiment voiced by a few was, I don't want to be your teacher and you should know what to do. Fatiguing. All right. Kamal retracted the statement. All right, go in here. It is fatiguing for me after all these years to hear about the same lack of progress toward racial equity decade after decade and have white people respond with the same ignorance or lack of interest in the topic or by not acknowledging the profound impact of their racial identity. I sometimes do not know whether to scream, cry, or just give up. Summary. Even with all the fatiguing experiences I have encountered because I am black, I am blessed. I benefited from the early affirmative action days when the powers that be were afraid and wanted to avoid lawsuits. Even though I was the token in many instances, it has likely been a lot easier for me than for other people of color who did not get that boost. I know that I had to work at least twice as hard to get where I am, and I am fatigued. However, I want to bring hope to the generations that hold the torch. When I hear millennials declare that they are exhausted and not willing to be the educators of the ignorant, I am gravely concerned. The inequitable systems will continue to be exhausting for millennials and Generation Z, born after 1997, to navigate, whether they are teachers or not. Black fatigue leads to all manners of physical and emotional problems, many of which go undetected. Lifting the burden of being an educator may lessen the day-to-day fatigue, but that alone will not dismantle racist systems. As I shared in the introduction, maybe the 2020 global Black Lives Matter protests against racism were a real wake-up call. No longer could white people claim sublime ignorance of anti-black racism. Very powerful chapter. Really like chapter 1. Very good stuff. And once again, I'm really loving this book here. Really easy to read, very easy to access, not that long. I think we're going to blow through it by the end of this week. We finished chapter 1. I will not be reading chapter 2 now. But I encourage everybody to pick up this book once again for yourself on Amazon. Read this book for yourself, even though I'm reading it free for all of y'all. Everybody, when they read a text, can always, get it for themselves and interpret it themselves. And do your own live reading if you want to. If you don't like my style of reading, hey, do it yourself. Do it yourself if you don't like the way I do it here. But glad to have everybody up in the live stream chat. Shout out to Nelson. Shout out to Kamal. Shout out to Ozzy. Shout out to everybody that showed up to learn and interact with the text. Here's one last part that we'll read. It is certain in any case that ignorance, allied with power, is the most ferocious enemy justice can have. James Baldwin, black novelist, essayist, playwright, poet, social critic, and one of America's foremost writers. We need to read some James Baldwin, and we will. But not for today, and not until we finish this book. We will start chapter 2 tomorrow, addressing sublime ignorance. Shout out to, once again, everybody who hopped in. Y'all be easy out there and have a good night. Peace.